Is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, one of the things I love about this institution is my colleagues come to the floor with different life experiences. They come with different opinions. They come with a different set of bosses. The 700,000 folks that I call my boss back home in Georgia, I'm sure have very different views than those who call themselves the boss of my friend from Massachusetts. But I tell you, these three bills that this rule makes in order, not that this rule declares a foregone conclusion of passage, no, that just makes in order for debate on the floor of this House, these three bills are exactly the kind of thing that this House should be working on. And I'm proud to bring it today. Number one, Mr. Speaker, I don't serve on the Oversight and Government Reform Committee. That's where this resolution of disapproval has come from. I did last cycle. I don't this cycle. I heard colleague after colleague come to the floor and defend the rights of not being fired because your sister or your daughter or your son or your brother used birth control. Mr. Speaker, that's outrageous. I can't imagine that someone would be fired for what their sister or their brother does in terms of their reproductive health choices. I agree. I agree. And if there is an opportunity to work together to prevent that from happening that is apparently happening en masse here in the District of Columbia, I want to be a part of it. But the truth is it's not happening en masse. In fact, it's not happening at all. It is not happening at all. Mr. Speaker, I do not mind being lectured by my friends to get back to the business of the people. I do not mind. In fact, I am on board with it every single day of the week. We can start earlier and we can start later, and I will be here. But do not, Mr. Speaker, do not lecture me on getting about the business of the people and come down with story after story after story that is not what this legislation is about, that is not a problem, that is not something that any of us disagree on. Mr. Speaker, we have some legitimate disagreements on this floor. And if we pass this rule, we will be able to get into the nitty-gritty of those disagreements. But we do not disagree on the freedom of family members to make their own reproductive health choices without it impacting our own employment. And I say to my friends sincerely, if we can find a case in the District of Columbia, I don't mean a case this year, I don't mean a case last year, I mean a case ever of that happening, seek me out as your partner and I will help you. Because what folks seem to miss here in this conga line of frustration is that if we reject the D.C. Council's resolution, we return D.C. to the law of the land as it exists when? Today. We don't take a single right away from anybody. We don't take a single freedom away from anybody. We're not interested in doing that whatsoever. What we are interested in doing is protecting religious freedom. It turns out if you live in Washington, D.C., Mr. Speaker, you might work for an institution that lobbies for life. You might work for an institution that focuses on faith. This is a town of ideas, Mr. Speaker, and in the rush to pass a piece of legislation, these are not my words, these are the words of Vincent Gray in his letter to the members of this council of the District of Columbia. In the rush to push this bill through, the council did not take the time to protect this cathedral of freedom that we have here. Did not take the time to make sure that that first and most important of our constitutional freedoms was protected. Now, Mr. Speaker, the Constitution's the District of Columbia can do to undermine the Constitution, but they can cause a lot of problems for folks along the way. This is a resolution of disapproval to prevent that from happening. Mr. Speaker, the second bill that's here, H.Res. 1732, this Regulatory Integrity Protection Act, my friends suggest that we're talking about clean water in this country, that this is about Republicans undermining clean water. I will say again, as I said about the resolution of disapproval, if we pass this bill, we will roll the regulatory environment of clean water so far back, it will be just like it is today. That's what we're going to do. I just want to be clear about those radical ideas that my friends on the left have suggested. If we have the will in this body to pass this bill, we're going to roll regulations so far back It will be exactly like it is as I'm standing here today. Mr. Speaker, what this bill is about is preventing the regulatory overreach going forward. Guess what? I live in Gwinnett County, Georgia. I challenge you to have a water treatment plant that does a better job than we do. We have a water fountain right there where the sewage gets treated. Mr. Speaker, you can go ahead and press that water fountain and have yourself a drink. That's how clean it is. We put it back into the lake cleaner than we take it out of the lake. I will not be lectured by my friends in an executive office downtown about how to clean water in the state of Georgia. I promise you I care more about clean water in Georgia than anyone on Pennsylvania Avenue does. We're succeeding today. If we have a problem with state regulation of clean water, come to me. I will be your partner. We will work on that together. The problem is not that Georgia isn't doing a good job. The problem is that the feds are planning to get in the way of Georgia doing a good job. This bill would stop it. If we pass this rule, we'll be able to have that debate. And finally, Mr. Speaker, and the bill that makes me the proudest, is our concurrent budget resolution. My friends have lots to say about why it is this budget doesn't balance. Let's be clear, I believe that they're wrong. But what's more important in this discussion, Mr. Speaker, is that my friends don't want the budget to balance. We had a free and open debate on this floor. We considered every budget that any member of this chamber wanted to offer, every single one. Interesting thing happened, Mr. Speaker. Every Republican budget that was introduced balanced within 10 years and didn't raise taxes on hardworking Americans. Every single budget the Democrats introduced never balanced. Not in 10 years, not in 20 years, not in 100 years. And every single one raised taxes on hardworking Americans by trillions of dollars. Trillions of dollars in new taxes still didn't reach balance. My friends, I understand we have a fundamental disagreement about how this country ought to be run. And I am glad that we have that debate here on this chamber. We are a deliberative body. I respect the opinions of my friends. I do believe there's a common ground that we can come to. But, Mr. Speaker, this is that common ground today. For years, the budget wasn't even passed in the United States Senate, much less tried to bring it together so that the House and the Senate are working off a single page of music for the first time. Since 1991, this chamber has done its job in concert with the Senate. It's no small thing. Far from being something to be criticized, it's something to be celebrated. I don't know where the votes are going to be, Mr. Speaker. Conferencing something with the Senate is hard. I promise you that my bosses back home in Georgia have a much more conservative view of the world than many of the folks do in the United States Senate. But guess what? I don't get everything I want every day. What I get is an opportunity to come together to build that bridge of common ground and agreement. That's the agreement we have before us today. Not my ideas, not Democratic ideas, not Republican ideas, but collaborative House, Senate ideas. Having a budget for the federal government for the first time in 15 years. Mr. Speaker, I urge all of my colleagues, take a look at this rule. You'll be proud. Take a look at the work of the hardworking people in the Rules Committee upstairs, 9 Republicans, 4 Democrats getting together late in the evening trying to make the rules work. You will be proud. Every single Democratic amendment made an order on the Regulatory Integrity Act. Resolution of disapproval brought exactly as the Home Rule Act intended, last used by Democrats to disapprove, today used by this chamber. And finally, that budget brought only after everybody's ideas were debated and the best rose to the top. Mr. Speaker, I urge strong support of all of my colleagues of this fair and honest rule. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time and I move to the previous question.
Gentleman's time has expired.